Hello, everybody. Welcome to class. This is your professor, Patricio Solis, and we will be diving deeply into Thomas L. Friedman's 10 intensifiers for globalization, given in his book, The World is Flat, from 2005, and the updated edition, which came out in 2006. Now, this is a while ago, about 20 years ago, and I think it's a good midpoint, since the origin of contemporary globalization, because as you know, globalization goes farther than the fall of the Berlin Wall, which happens on November 9th, 1989. Globalization happened before that, and as Friedman points out, the fall of the Berlin Wall was not just the igniter of contemporary globalization, but was the result of many forces that were pushing towards that before, so that were pushing towards that break. Okay, so I think it's a good midpoint, a good point in history of contemporary globalization, which can be said to have begun there in terms of the current moment of globalization, which is very intense and different from anything that had happened before. Okay, so the book comes out in 2005, and that is about 16 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Now, that is about 20 years ago, and we are much farther into the world that the fall of the Berlin Wall generated or allowed to expand. Okay, this world we live in. Pardon. So let's look at the first two items of these 10 intensifiers of globalization that Friedman lays out. We had looked at them last time, but just as a way of summary. Okay, so there's obviously the November 9th, 1989 fall of the Berlin Wall, which I've already mentioned a few times, which is important historically, not only as a great intensifier, but also as a result of already happening cultural flows. As you know, we had talked about music, rock and roll, in particular pop music coming from America, capitalism just kind of spreading all around, free trade, political movements and political zones. Okay, the European Union, you have Asia Pacific, and so on. Okay, North American Trade Agreement. that all this stuff that is sort of coagulating, okay, around the world. But essentially, what I want to say about this is that, and this is something that Friedman very clearly lays out, is that there is a message in the fall of the Berlin Wall, right? That says there's one way to be modern, or there's one main way to be modern, which is to open up, okay, on many levels, politically through democracy, in terms of commerce through free trade, in terms of international relations through integration, and just assuming an overall liberal attitude towards the world, a kind of openness. Okay, and so therefore free trade becomes the only game in town after the Soviet Union falls in 1991. India, as stated in the book, is one of the countries that really steps into globalization not too long after. Okay, and Friedman quotes from a few people who were in India at the time, and how they saw the opportunity and thought, like, okay, so we are close to the world and we should open up to the world. And of course that takes a long time, but it's this kind of change of zeitgeist, as it were, that is so important. Not just the kind of legal structures, but the change of zeitgeist. the spirit of the times change, and India, Brazil, China, Russia, to a degree follow, particularly China and India. Okay, so that's the first item. All right, fall of the Berlin Wall, legal, economic, and very importantly, not to be overstated, cultural shift. The outlook changes. Okay. So the second intensifier that Friedman gives in his book "The World is Flat," that came out in 2005, is another date. He gives August 9th, 1995 as a date. That's a mere about 6 years later, a little less than 6 years after the fall of the wall. And this pretty much signals the day Netscape went public. Okay, Netscape going public is a big deal for Friedman, and for the laying down of the platform that becomes the sort of launching pad for greater collaboration the world over, and which is a highly technological platform. Okay, so Netscape is essentially a browser, right? So leading to that browser, there had to be a structure, okay, of technology that needed to be laid out and sort of united, okay, for it to emerge. So because obviously you cannot have a browser if you don't have the internet, right? And you cannot have the internet if you don't have a PC, okay? And you cannot have a PC unless you have the breakthroughs in computer memory and so on, okay? And not to mention the World Wide Web, okay, which we talked about last time. Now, we could pick it up really early, right? Like in the 70s or even before that in terms of computational or computer breakthroughs. But I think, well, Friedman does a good job at bringing us to the point of actual genesis of the more modern foundations for computer development, okay? And this happens with two things that happen almost simultaneously, though not exactly simultaneously. There's a few breakthroughs in the PC and Apple realms, okay? In particular, the breakthrough that Friedman gives is the 1991 Windows 3.0 inclusion into the PC. Okay, so people bought a PC, or the physical computer, personal computer, got Windows 3.0 with it. Okay, this is only 6 months after the fall. So right after that, there's the internet. Okay, this is pre World Wide Web, essentially, only, not too much earlier, but earlier than the World Wide Web. So the internet is two computers communicating with each other, usually through dial-up, commercial dial-up. That's super important. Okay, so people are able to buy the dial-up service in order to have computers communicate with each other. But if you can imagine, there was no World Wide Web just yet. There might have been sites, okay, but the whole and computer exchanges of information and text and numbers and whatnot. So there was a point to having commercial dial-up through a modem, through a phone line. Obviously, otherwise there wouldn't have been a release of it commercially, okay? But the World Wide Web, which is not the same thing as the internet, as I was saying last time, it happens really around 1991, okay? So what is the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web? The internet could be considered the more physical networks that connect computers to each other. Okay, the World Wide Web is the content that is connected through the internet. Okay, so that is a difference there, and also the World Wide Web refers to content that is seamlessly integrated, so that computers can communicate not just physically, right, but that they can communicate through similar protocols, languages. Okay, and now it's all sort of standardized, right? Greatly standardized. So we know, everybody knows what a website is. Okay, a website is very clear with HTTP. You enter the address. You have web browsers. Okay, you have all of these things that are becoming, at that point in the early 90s, standardized. And it does take a few years for an actual web browser to emerge. Okay, so imagine the World Wide Web, the web without browsers. That was the early 90s world. Okay, without a proper browser, without standardized browsers. Now, Friedman gives this point, 1995, August 9th, 1995, as the point where the World Wide Web really took off. Okay, with the release of Netscape's browser. Now, Netscape does sort of collapse as a company, and Windows takes over, and Windows releases its own browser and its own competing technology at the time. Okay, but Netscape is the one that becomes standardized. It's free. Okay, and it really spreads like wildfire. It's amazing. Okay, lastly, or soon thereafter, after 1995, you see the .com bubble happen. There aren't. What's a bubble? First of all, a bubble would be when too many people invest, too many investors, too much money gets thrown at a particular technology or sector of the economy, so that the prices become artificially inflated and do not really reflect the realities on the ground. Okay, and there have been many bubbles, including housing, including banking, including, I would say, cryptocurrencies, including, well, obviously the .com bubble, which, people were so excited at seeing this new world, this great digitalization of the world. The great digitalization of the world happens because the whole world is becoming digital, sucked into this kind of black hole, which is the net, right? The realm of the digital. Okay, the realm of the digital. It sucks in pictures, texts, music, data, video, eventually maps. Even, I would argue, okay, later, and this comes after, much later, okay, in the development of this particular movement of technology, I would argue that human personalities get sucked into the hyper real world of the internet, of computers, of the digital. Okay, and friendships, political movements, identities, dating. Anyway, so human behavior. It's not only things that get digitized. It is human behaviors that get digitized as well. And so these are the beginnings of that. I mean, very real beginnings, because you already have the whole thing kind of laid out. You have a PC, you have Windows, you have the internet, you have the World Wide Web, you have a reliable and standardized browser, okay? And the markets do see this, and you start seeing a lot of things like eBay, you start seeing Yahoo, you start seeing all these companies that are in Silicon Valley essentially, and they start getting so much money for everything, all kinds of services, right? They do see the potential, but there's an investment, and there's a lot of money being thrown at very sort of haphazard projects, or projects that don't go anywhere. Anyway, so that is the bubble, right? That gets super inflated, and a lot of these companies, most of them, 90% of them, are managed by very, very young people. Okay, like late teens or early 20s. Okay, I cannot overstate the excitement, because I graduated high school in the year 2000. So right around the time I was graduating high school, you had stuff like Napster, which was a sort of a music uploading and downloading company website. You had eBay, like the first kind of eBay steps. You had a lot of firsts. Okay, so you can imagine how exciting it must have been for the markets, and just culturally in general, there was a lot of positivity in this matter. Okay, we thought the world would be a global village of joy and commerce, but it wasn't like that. We got two great awakenings to the ruthlessness of the market and of the world happened not too long after, with the bubble bursts, okay, one, and then 9/11 happens, okay. So those are very, very awakening episodes that rudely awakened us to the realities of connectivity and globalization on multiple levels, political, military, and also the uses that could be given to this amazing platform for collaboration. It wasn't only collaboration between teenagers buying music or pictures of artists and stuff like that. It was actually later we saw bad actors, okay, including the bad actors later were found out to be governmental. Okay, but we're not going to get into that, because we're not doing a sociological study of it. We're just doing a technological layout of the great platform for collaboration that was laid out in the early 90s. Okay, by 1995, the whole thing is ready, and then by the late 90s, the bubble is just growing exponentially. Okay, and then it bursts. Okay, so in the year 2000, if I'm not wrong, that's when it bursts. So good things now. Friedman. So that would be the second foundation or intensifier for globalization. So number one was the fall of the Berlin Wall. Second one would be the Netscape, everything that leads to Netscape. And then he talks about workflow. Okay, workflow. Now, in order for us to have workflow, okay, the kind of ability to move between websites and between programs, and that different computers to be able to talk to each other so that people can work between platforms seamlessly, is what happens next, which is a great step, okay? The standardization of protocols. That's super key, and Friedman does a good job at laying that out. Okay, so the standardization of protocols, you have HTML, which is the language for websites, HTTP, which has to do with addresses, IP, which has to do with security, TCP, IP, XML, and SOAP. Okay, now I'm not a super techie here, so I'm just going to read from a passage that kind of explains that, okay, which I did last time, but I really want to kind of summarize that before we get into the other topics. So HTML was the language that enabled anyone to design and publish documents and data so that they could be transmitted to, read on any computer anywhere. I mean, that's, to us, that's like normal, okay? But that whole standardization had to be fought for, and there are some heroes, in fact, there. So there's a lot to look into there. HTTP was the computer language that described how you put this content on the internet railroad, okay? And TCP/IP was the railroad track itself, okay? TCP/IP is based on the simple concept of breaking large chunks of data into bite-sized packets, directing those packets from computer to computer through a scalable network, and reconstituting the individual packets to replicate the original document. Okay, so there you go. And after that, of course, much more standardized ways of communicating in terms of the objects themselves ensued. So JPEG, for example, travels and can be read by all. And even today, we know what a JPEG is in terms of photos, right? And JPEGs can be embedded into HTML designed websites, okay? Beyond that, obviously this is a while ago, right? So the world of of networking has expanded rapidly into also the realm of artificial intelligence, okay? But which creates a workflow in which almost human intervention is a hurdle, I would say, or maybe just a very like a removed, like the actual lifting happens by the lifting of heavy objects. The heavy lifting happens by through the hands of artificial intelligence, which are dynamic algorithms that can generate their own movement towards a goal without much direction, okay? So, but before that, of course, we had ways that were revolutionary, such as Ajax, right? Which allows you to run a company online and so on. So, you know, the cloud, these breakthroughs, right? So imagine being a company, right? And you have to go, and Friedman explained this, you know, you have to go, like if there was a call center, they wrote down the order for somebody who was buying, let's say, auto parts. They wrote down the order, they wrote down the address, and they literally printed the order. Okay, because maybe computers couldn't communicate with each other like at an internal network. Okay, so they printed the order, they walked it through or faxed it to the place where they kept all of their computer parts. Okay, and then a person had to go and get the computer part, probably sign some document, bring it back to the person keeping track of all of the changes, then give it to somebody to go deliver it, and hope they get the address right so they could bring the auto part or something like that, right? Now things are completely integrated, and all of this can be done on the cloud or in the cloud, okay? So all of the computers are integrated with each other, and not only are computers integrated, but cell phones are integrated as well, and other things such as GPS. So even the vehicles are integrated, and it's all sort of there to be seen. So that's the great integration of workflow. Now, I'm just giving you one example, but this could be, this happens at every level, okay? And even individuals all have cell phones today, smartphones that are sort of tracking devices and have their GPS tools and whatnot. And so in a way, for example, you're always connected to your social network. I mean, that's a kind of workflow that takes place as well. So it really starts with workflow at jobs, but then it really expands into a multiplicity of realms. Okay, so that's where we left last time, and I just wanted to give you that summary. But now we're going to get into other stuff, so let's get into it. Number 4, Friedman gives a fourth intensifier of globalization. And remember that this is a good place to look at globalization from a sort of midpoint. Okay, this is like 15 years that this book, The World is Flat. 15 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, more or less, okay? Now we are almost close to 40 years into it. So that's a long time, right? We're 36 years or so into after the great intensifier, which is the fall of the Berlin Wall. And remember that globalization takes place on multiple levels. The globalization is a world integration at the cultural level, okay? At the economic level, at the political level, and at the technological level, okay? So it's not just, I'm giving you different aspects that are being focused on in this book, and I think it's a good midpoint to see the past and from our stance to see where it went, okay? Number 4 is uploading, okay? Uploading, everybody knows what uploading is. You upload, well, we had uploading in the early years of the World Wide Web with Napster, right? People uploaded songs into a shared vault, and then others came and got them, okay? And music companies thought that was illegal, and so Napster failed. Well, it failed commercially, but it succeeded in really breaking a barrier, okay? So that was sort of the beginnings of uploading. Friedman points out that at the beginning of the, let's say, great global platform for collaboration and exchange that we have talked about, the idea, the common idea, the paradigm, okay, was that people, users, internet users, were consumers, okay? So they would download newspapers, they would download music, they would download, well, later, movies, pictures, information, texts, all kinds of stuff, right? But what uploading does is show that actually the big change, the big paradigm change, is that people want to be contributors. Like citizens want to be contributors. Net citizens want to be contributors, okay? So it takes a while, but there's a more speed in uploading gets embedded into the networks, so that the internet is not only just a place to download things, but people start uploading. What do they start uploading? Like I had mentioned, music, blogs, answers. Okay, now many of you, for example, if you go to a restaurant, you read a review, that's user-generated recommendations and reviews. I mean, this was a whole change of paradigm. Okay, the paradigm prior to that was like, we're going to throw information at people like a television does, or like a newspaper does. But with blogs, which comes from weblogs, okay, that was the original name. Weblogs becomes blogs, and then in these blogs, people, you know, gossip about, let's say, movie stars, or they talk about politics, or they even interview people. So you have a bunch of citizen journalists really happy. And then blogs really develop into other things. For example, you have micro blogs. What's Twitter? Twitter is a micro blog where people say stuff and upload their thoughts, share information in a micro manner, right? So X now, or whatever. Instagram, okay, it's a blog of pictures and so on. YouTube, okay, which he doesn't even mention, interestingly enough, because YouTube, I think, comes later. Okay, so really, that's a big paradigm change. That's a big change of looking at the world, that people are not just looking to get information, but they're looking to put out information. Okay, and not only at the, let's say, cultural level, but also the commercial level. Maybe the Friedman gives an example of a Canadian mining company, okay, a struggling Canadian mining company, which puts out an advertisement, okay, in these early years, and the company says, well, we're looking for remote geo professionals, geography, and maybe geographic information systems, or some sort of a geographic tool users to help us find gold. And then, like, literally thousands of people send their proposals to this Canadian mining company, and they choose two or three or a few of the people that wanted to collaborate with them, and indeed they actually find gold. And so the information was uploaded by the workers in a sort of effort to get picked by the mining company in order to work with them. So mapping as well. So it works on many levels. So there's BitTorrent, for example. That's one of the companies that Friedman mentions, which allows for users to upload content. All right, so that is one of the items of the great intensification of the great world flattener, as Friedman puts it. Number 5 would be outsourcing. Okay, outsourcing. This refers to, in particular, sending jobs out to be done elsewhere. Sending jobs out to be done elsewhere. In particular, Friedman mentions the case of India, okay, which is the great outsourcer, or rather the great insourcer in this case, right? Because the jobs get outsourced from the United States, and they're taken up by Indian companies who have a lot of professionals in the IT industries and can do it for much less money, okay, and at the same level that American workers, IT workers, can do it. And so they are great beneficiaries of this change. Okay, now prior to what? Prior to the year 2000, okay, which sees the peak of the dot-com bubble, the possibilities to communicate in terms of computers between let's say companies in California and companies in New York or Texas and workers in India and other places, but particularly he gives the example of India, which is the great insourcer. Companies that wanted to have workers, say, work on websites or work on computer networking or work on computer systems or even fix bugs at the app level, okay? They needed to, or program, because apps come later, right? So at the program level, did not have the infrastructure to communicate with India. So what happens is that there was this thing called Y2K, which was a big problem, people thought, that would happen when computers reached the year 2000. A lot of people thought that computers were going to break down because they were set up in a way to only go, like the inner computer clocks would reset at the year 2000, and everything would be erased. Okay, that was the common belief, and so people were afraid, and they needed to fix computers, like thousands of computers. So they do actually, because a lot of the people in the United States remember, this is during the dot-com bubble, okay, before it bursts. Computer engineers in the United States are extremely busy and making a lot of money working for companies that are being set up for the first time. Okay, I mean internet companies, internet-based companies. The whole world that you see now is being set up. Okay, so they're working for those companies, but like a lot of people need particular corporations need their computers to be reset by engineers or by IT professionals, and there aren't enough here. Now, during the dot-com bubble, a lot of fiber optics cables get laid out across the ocean. Now, a fiber optic cable is a cable that can transmit information at a much faster rate than phone lines, obviously. Okay, so now satellite at this point is sort of out of the question because I think it's too expensive, and also it's the amount of information that needs to be shared is tremendous. So during the bubble, fiber optic cables had been laid out in a hurry across the ocean to be able to communicate with Asia, right, Japan, India, and other places in the world, Latin America and whatnot, okay, Europe. So during so people had to reset their computers because of this fear of the Y2K, and so that's when Indian workers come in, and they're like, whoa, so there's a lot of workers in India, okay, and the workers here in the United States are charging a lot of money, and many of them are busy because of this bubble, and the fiber optics have already been laid out. So why don't we send that work to India? And they have a great computer institute that is churning out like top-notch professionals. It's called IIT, okay? And so India doesn't have the infrastructure, but it has the professionals. And the fiber optics have already been laid out. So the answer is very crystal clear. Send the jobs to India. And in India, mid-level IT professionals are the ones who actually do this resetting of the Y2K of the computers here in America electronically. Okay? And so they reset that, and so there's a precedent that gets set that, Indian workers can do it much cheaply and very capably. And they sort of save the day, right? And then the Y2K does not really take place. Like, they thought like airplanes were gonna fall, and they thought like like fire stations, because everything's getting computerized. They thought fire stations were gonna stop working, and everything was gonna be a mess. This is a side note, but there's somebody who says what you're afraid of is never what kills you. Okay, that's a very wise thing. What you're afraid of is never what actually kills you. So you're actually taking care of this particular situation, throwing all your energy into it, and then something else comes, and that's what does you in. So what does the world in? 9/11, right? Terrorism. And that is the first great awakening to the darkness behind this great connectivity platform. Okay, and the connected world, which was already networked in terms of transport. Okay, transportation, airplanes in particular, but also freeways and buses and whatnot. Okay, so anyway, then the bubble bursts. Okay, in 2000. And then a lot of people lose a lot of money. Okay, but the cables had already been laid out across the ocean, the fiber optic cables, because there was so much money being thrown around into these companies. So the fiber optic cables had already been laid out. Okay, and guess what? Now that the bubble happens, as anything after a bubble, the prices are extremely cheap. A lot of companies go broke. A lot of people lose millions of dollars. Okay, because of this overinvestment. But the actual skeleton, the infrastructure for connectivity at the world level, not only at the local level, but at the world level, had already been laid out in a hurry. And guess what? A lot of the companies that do survive the .com bubble, and the ones that were to come, cannot pay as much money because after the bubble had burst, there isn't as much money being invested into .com companies. Like, it got really ridiculous at one point. Like, oh, you want to buy sweaters for your pet? Okay, we'll start a company for that. You want services? You want to get a massage? Okay, we'll start a company for that. You want all kinds of like really discombobulated enterprises take place, and then a lot of them just go away, and the ones that are strong, the companies that are strong, remain and get solidified. Okay, but they still need a lot of the internet world. This great platform is not like it stops. It stops being a bubble, but it grows later, of course. And so they need a lot of workers, a lot of IT workers. And who has those IT workers? India. And they had proven themselves to the Y2K by coming through and saving the day, as it were. So now that the .com companies have a lot less money, they don't want to hire necessarily people in the States who are charging a lot more, obviously. And so there's a great movement towards hiring people from India whom they can pay a lot less and work remotely. Okay, and a lot of people from India that had actually come to the States during the .com bubble go back to India. So this is just one example. It's the greatest example. Okay, but it's one that's very clear, where technology actually builds a bridge between two societies that become integrated at the commercial level. Okay, and also in a way culturally, right? Because commercial integration becomes cultural integration as well. So we have to remember that India is a developing nation, and a very interesting developing nation. First of all, India is the most populated country in the world, above China today. So it was greatly populated back then. Also, a lot of young people. So India has the human power, but it doesn't have the dynamic and thriving economy that the United States has a vibrant economy of disruption at the economic level, but they do have the people, the human capital. I don't like that word, human capital. Humans are not capital. Okay, but capital means money. Humans are much more valuable than capital. Okay, but in this sense, India does have the people and the IT workers, and so then it becomes a great provider of work to the West, to the United States. Now, that's one example. Outsourcing happens at many different rates in many different places, and today we're in a place where if you want to, I've used outsourcing myself. So if I want some work done, I go to Fiverr, for example, not to advertise any companies, and they connect me to workers all over the world. Okay, and I can pay them something that would be great for that particular market, but it would be less for my own, so that I can meet my bottom line. And so there's a lot. I've worked with people in sub-Saharan Africa that have helped me when I released my book. I worked with somebody who helped me set up interviews, a sort of PR manager. I've worked with people who've helped me design covers for my books. I've worked with people who've given me classes when I was taking a class, not only through that particular place, but through different platforms. So the individual also takes advantage of outsourcing. Now, is that problematic? Yes. Why? Because there's a level of competition that, say, in the particular case of IT workers, like computer scientists here in the States, they're now getting competition by workers in India and other places, in China and Japan and whatnot, right? So, and that happens at many, many levels. So the playing field becomes much more leveled, and hence Friedman gives the metaphor of the world becoming flat, which is a metaphor. It's nothing but a metaphor. Okay. So anyway, that's outsourcing, and that actually the worker in the States starts becoming displaced, as it were, in many ways. Okay, so it's not all beautiful and perfect, but we are just trying to understand the phenomenon. Later we will do a critique of it through the novel that I wrote, in a way to think through these problems, the Reggaeton Cruise, but that will come later. Okay, so number 6, we have offshoring, which is outsourcing, but for factories, to put it simply. So where outsourcing would be the factory or the company stays here in the States, and then they hire somebody from another market in order to save money or reach workers that might not be available in the States. Offshoring actually means that the whole enterprise, the whole company, well, not the whole company, the actual manufacturing aspect of that company and other aspects as well, get transported overseas. Okay, so whereas India was the great winner and the great foreign player in terms of outsourcing, China is the great winner and the great player in terms of offshoring. Okay, so Friedman rightly mentions at the beginning of the chapter, or the beginning of chapter 6, offshoring, that it is only in 2001 that China joins the World Trade Organization. It is in 2001 that China joins the World Trade Organization. So, the World Trade Organization is a structure for world trade, as the name says. And there are certain rules that countries have to follow in order to join the World Trade Organization. They have to submit to the rules of engagement in order to participate in the great highway of economic exchange. and China joins in 2001. Now this is significant because China at the time was the largest country in the world and had a lot of potential for growth. Okay, had a lot of young people, and it was cheap, but also educated. So, and it had the minimum standards in terms of setting up factories that were needed, because you, after all, it's not like every developing nation can qualify. You need some minimum standards in order to enter the arena. What are those standards? Communications, roads, airports, ports, factories, education, electricity, running water, these minimal things which are not present all over the world. Like a lot of the developing world does not actually meet those minimum standards. So China met the minimum standards, and China does a shift in their foreign policy, or not only in their foreign policy, but in their outlook. They embrace capitalism, or what they call socialism with Chinese characteristics, meaning it's highly controlled at the state level, but also freed up at the market level. Okay, and that happens sort of eventually, or it happens in steps, that China becomes integrated into the world market. In 2001, that marks a before and after. Okay, so as you can see, the Berlin Wall falls in 89. By 2001, which is not that much later, you have already China, okay, the People's Republic of China joining the world arena of economic exchange. Now, like I said, China has a lot of workers. It is cheaper. The taxes are lower. Now, there are a lot of hurdles also, right? It's a foreign country with foreign values in terms of how the workers are expected to perform and so on. And so American companies that send their factories over there have to align with the Chinese culture, and the other way around as well. Chinese workers have to align with American company corporate culture, and so there's an alignment at that level as well, a kind of recognition of the other. Okay, let's not be naive. There's a level of exploitation at times as well of the workers, right? And also perhaps a flooding of the market with cheaper made commodities, which in a way it's not horrible because we want to pay less, but it's problematic on multiple levels because perhaps some of those products are artificially cheap. Okay, and also as we come to see later, the movement of factories to China, and not only factories but also later managerial tasks. Okay, so like workflow, supply chaining becomes really, really developed in China, to the point that it goes beyond the United States. So China is cheaper than Mexico at that point. Mexico's GDP right now is roughly around 10,000 per year per capita. China is higher, but China is at 11,000 or 12,000 per year per capita. Last time I checked. That's how much each individual makes per year, which if you think, well, can you survive with $11,000 a year? In China, you can. In Mexico, you can. Okay? So these are middle income countries. But what I'm getting at is that at the time, China was much lower. India is still much lower. Okay, I don't know where it is right now. But so it was cheaper to make stuff in China than in Mexico. So a lot of factories go to China. Some of them go to Mexico and other places. Not as many go to the lesser developed countries because they don't have the minimum standards, as far as I know. Okay. Eventually, within 20 years, China becomes the world's factory. And that's what it's known as today. And a lot of factories leave the United States to go there and elsewhere. Okay? Then China has an issue that it actually starts losing people, and India surpasses it as the most populated country in the world. But it's not like China doesn't have a lot of people. China has a lot of people, and a lot of them young and hungry to perform and to consume as well. So this is key. At the beginning, China is a place to build things. Later, it becomes clear that China is a market as well. So check this out. American companies, say some car companies, say iPhone makers, say computer makers, say television makers, a lot of shoe make, whatever, right? They move to China because it's cheaper to make things there. They pay less taxes. There's more loose environmental protection, so the companies don't have to worry about that as much. They don't have to pay as much money to the workers. Their healthcare is not as expensive. Maybe the state is involved in their healthcare. That's my guess. There isn't as many lawsuits about like malpractice or just sort of unsafe conditions and stuff like that. It's really like, I don't want to say the Wild West, but it's much more loose. Okay. And also on top of that, China had joined the World Trade Organization, so it kind of had to submit to the World Trade Organization rules, more or less. Okay? And then also, the kicker is that China is a market as well. And as China gets richer, they want cars, they want more computers, they want more shoes, they want more laptops, they want iPhones, they want this, they want that. So by a lot of American and European, but American companies moving to China, they're generating products for the American consumer more cheaply, and so they can make more money. And transportation is extremely cheap because of the world integration at the transportation level. Docks, airplanes, ships, and so on. So that's really good for American companies that make a lot of money. But also, by having moved their factories to China, they have they are closer to the Chinese market. Okay, they're closer to the Chinese market, so they can actually spend less money in sending their products to China, so they can sell and break into these great markets. So the Chinese market actually becomes really important, not only as a factory. Remember this. The Chinese market becomes really important as a factory, but also as a new market of extreme potential. So that the Chinese economy becomes the most important world economy, or close to that, second most important economy. Okay, so there it is. That's offshoring, which is number 6, and we're gonna go on to number 7, which is supply chaining. Supply chaining is perhaps the most overlooked concept. I wasn't super aware of it, but what's a supply chain? And let's start with that. Supply chain would be the way in which the whole process of commerce, okay, from building, from making things, to selling the thing, to storing it, to transporting the thing, the good, to ordering more, happens. That's a supply chain. Okay, you need more shoes, order more, make more shoes, order more shoes. Now people don't want this kind of shoes. Now they don't want Nike, they want Adidas. Okay, now you make Adidas. The color, the green is out. Now people want to use red. There you go. So things like that. It's summer now. They need air conditioners. It's winter now. They need heaters. Okay, so supply chaining gets a boost. That's even understated. Walmart as far as I know, Walmart is the largest employer in the United States. And guess what? Walmart doesn't make anything. Walmart doesn't make anything. Walmart is a top-notch distributor and seller of things and keeper of things and orderer of things. I know I'm kind of messing up the language there, but you know what I'm saying. So that becomes extremely important as a model for commerce. And that is something that makes the world much more tightly oiled and organized. Okay? So Walmart is based in Arkansas, okay, in the south of the United States. And it develops a system which tags its products. Okay? So there comes somebody, the supply, the thing is that it's kind of like interesting to see where we start, because the supply chain is sort of chain, it's a circle. So we can artificially say that it starts when the customer walks into a Walmart and picks up a toy. Okay, let's just have that entry point there. But really it's a circle, so you can start anywhere with the making of the toy, or the storage of the toy, or the transportation of the toy. Okay, but let's say, just to make things more sort of simple, that the customer walks into a Walmart and then it goes into the toy aisle and picks up a toy. Okay, then they go and they buy it. Okay, so from the time the customer picks up the toy to the point they actually get they pay for the toy, there is already something that gets triggered by the computers, because every toy has a number, okay, a serial number, as it were. And then if a lot of people are buying the same kind of toy, there's a sort of alarm in this very connected system that says, okay, we need to order more toys. So actually they order more toys from the typically Chinese factory, and it gets transported. The point of this is that there's a seamless, quick process from buying to making to storing to delivering. Everything is digitized, and this is a key point, because Walmart doesn't want to buy too many toys and pay the expense of keeping them. Like storage is quite expensive, real estate is expensive everywhere, even in Arkansas. Okay, so and plus there's Walmarts everywhere, in New York and California and so on. So in these big markets, it's extremely expensive. So they don't want to storage the goods here. So what they do is they keep storage at a minimum, okay? And they order the toy, which is an example, it could be anything. And then if the toy stops selling, okay, then they can actually almost surgically communicate with the factories, and then order less toys. And let's say instead of toys of that particular toy, let's say PlayStations are ordered more consoles, right? So then they do a shift in almost like kind of turning up the volume or lowering the volume, right, in a very, very pointed surgical way. That is supply chaining. Okay, and if they see, for example, that people are buying more blue socks and they need to order less green socks, then they can communicate with the maker that way. Okay, so they tag products. They have a fleet of trucks that are all linked up by GPS, and they order directly from factories and know when something runs out. Okay, and they know what sells when. Now they have, and Friedman points this out, taken this practice of saving money, because the supply chaining really saves money, and the human element is an element in it, obviously. And we see that they have done just horrible practices as well. Okay, so there's talk of, like, overnight workers being locked up and to work, and not only in terms of Walmart, but in terms of Amazon, which is a competitor. People being even like their time breaks being timed, and their lunch breaks being very minimal. And maybe some of you have worked for Amazon or Walmart. Okay, I actually delivered for Walmart for extra money at one point. So it's not like, how do we put this? It's a monster, a juggernaut of extremely precise actions. Okay, and you feel it when you're in that world. Like, somebody goes in the factory, brings something out, then the truck is there, then the deliveries are made, then it's integrated with the website, and so on. So, like, to think, just to give you an example, or to give you a view of it, to think that all of this is integrated with factories on the other side of the world. So they're communicating in real time. Johnny picked up a PlayStation. Okay, we need more PlayStations. And then the whole network gets lit up and works in a way that brings the toys as cheaply as possible. And workers have suffered in it, and they have been accused, rightly so, of depressing wages. Okay, but supply chaining is key in that Walmart doesn't make anything, and Walmart is a great example of this. And then it is a flag bearer for supply chaining. Chinese companies are also great at supply chaining now, but at the beginning it was Walmart. Okay, and then Amazon came in, and they're extremely innovative and ruthless at supply chaining. But that's the new way to be. It's not only about buying things. Anybody can buy things and sell them more expensive for a profit. Okay, but the thing to where they save a lot of money is in making the process so seamless, so that no money is wasted and things happen quickly and move through the digestive system of the beast let's just stop it at that. I'm not going to go into that metaphor because it leads to some scatological conclusions. All right. But that's the way of the world, and that's the new way of the world, where a lot of places don't do things, don't make things. In fact, and I think Friedman is very right to point out that, for example, many companies do not ever get a hold of their products. So they're kind of only facades. They're only advertising and designing companies. So you can order some shoes from, let's say, whatever company, right? I'm just gonna make say Skechers. I don't even know Skechers, so like, you would have to look this up. But it gets made in a Chinese factory, certainly. Okay, without a doubt. And then it gets delivered to you to their supply chaining, so that actually, I'm just going to say Skechers, could be Nike, could be Adidas, Reebok, whatever, right? They don't see the shoe. And the shoe, and this is even more scary. Well, maybe that's the word, I don't know, more impressive in a way. You have single factories in China and elsewhere, but particularly in China, that make shoes for different brands. So I let me give you an example from my own life that I thought would be an educational highlight, or would shine a light on this. So I used to order food from Uber Eats from this particular Cajun restaurant, southern Louisiana food, and I liked it. It was good. Okay, so I ordered a few times, 3, 4, 5 times. Okay, one day I decided, you know what, I shouldn't just keep ordering food. I'm gonna support the restaurant. So I looked up the address and I drove there on Western. You might know where I'm talking about. Western near Melrose. And I go there ready to eat there with my wife, and guess what? There was no restaurant. It was an industrial kitchen that had like 5 restaurants in it, all online. So it was all advertisement that it was different restaurants. So it was a single kitchen, a single mega kitchen, churning out different dishes for all these quote unquote different restaurants that were a facade for this mega kitchen. Okay, well, it's the same way with a lot of the shoe factories and other factories. You have a single factory making Nike, Adidas, Reebok, Skechers, and so on. Okay, and so you have a single factory making all these shoes, and they just do the sort of the tweaking to deliver them in the proper boxes. And then the shoe companies don't see the shoes necessarily. They design the shoes, but the shoes are made elsewhere, and then the supply chains are so seamless, so they might go directly from the factory to UPS to be delivered to you, so that you're paying for something that comes directly from the factory. And so that is the Walmart model. Make it as seamless as possible. Don't own anything. Don't hold on to things. That's a better way of putting it. Don't hold on to things. Let it just slide, let it go, and collect the money. So a lot of, obviously Amazon is part of this too, which, in fact, Amazon facilitates a lot of commerce and just charges people to use their supply chain because it's so great. Like, great in the sense of mammoth. Okay, so let's go to number 8. We have a couple to go. Insourcing is the next one. So for insourcing, you have UPS. Okay, UPS is a great example of insourcing. Now, insourcing is the opposite of outsourcing. For outsourcing, a company sends their jobs to be done elsewhere for less money. For insourcing, a company, and I think it's about 2/3 of global trade happens between corporations, so that's why we're focusing so much on them. Okay, trade between corporations is the global economy. Obviously, there are people behind it, but it is the corporations that bridge the world. Insourcing happens when a corporation brings in another company to fix it from inside. They let another company come all the way into the heart of their company and say, okay, you're doing this right, you're hiring right, you're hiring wrong, you're making things too slowly, you're making them in the wrong place, you're paying too much here, you're paying too much there. So they hire different kind of consultants, but it's more than a consultant because it's a deep surgery at the structural level. So the example that is given by Friedman in his book The World is Flat, which we're kind of looking at right now, is UPS. Now UPS, UPS, they have a fleet of trucks. They have people in brown shorts that deliver things, okay? And this came to, it was news to me. I didn't know anything about it. So it's not like they only transport things and deliver goods, right? Like male people, like male men, male women, and track. But UPS has great coordinating capabilities. And I think that's kind of like the heart of the lesson, that's where it's at, in the coordinating capabilities more than in anything else. So whether it be through supply chaining, offshoring, outsourcing, coordinating capabilities and serving as the middleman between the consumer and the factory. Okay, well, UPS has great coordinating capabilities because they have just a great number of trucks and a great number of workers, and they're located at airports, and they're located they have access to everything everywhere in terms of transportation, right? So what they do is they work with corporations and sometimes with small businesses too. In fact, they work a lot with small businesses, and they say, okay, we're going to go inside of your company, we're going to rework it, and then we're going to tell you we're going to help you sell your products and take them to people. And as I had said earlier, some companies never see their products because UPS helps them get it from abroad because of all the offshoring, right? So it's made abroad. Things are not made here as much in the United States, and that's a political issue that has come up time and time again. But it's it's apropos now, but we're not going to get into that. And so let's say they're bringing video cameras, or that's kind of old, right? Video cameras do exist, but let's say I don't know, they're bringing in cell phones, right? So they might be made in Korea. Why would a company that is selling cell phones want to store thousands of cell phones when somebody's ordering by phone or is ordering online? So UPS tells them, you know what, and don't store anything. We'll actually pick it up from the factory. We'll actually make it so that people can track their deliveries and see where they are. We'll use our fleet of trucks, okay, and then we'll actually deliver it. And not only that, but we'll make sure that the person pays, because we won't give it to them until they pay, and also somebody signs so that we know and we can take a picture. So the whole pickup, ordering, delivery, and in some cases, as Friedman points out, even some of the fixing takes place at UPS. How do you call it? At UPS facilities. So, for example, let's say you want a computer fixed, right? So instead of and it's a simple fix, instead of sending your laptop to the actual factory, which might be in upstate New York, or it might be in the American South, or it might be in Shanghai, and that's going to take a while, right, for a computer to go there, for them to fix it, for them to bring it back. And then what UPS said, okay, why don't we just set up a fixing facility here at the airport? So then you send your computer to get fixed, and it gets fixed right at the airport or wherever they have their facility, and then it gets right away sent back to the consumer. So that is what we're talking about when we talk about insourcing. You have a company such as UPS, but there could be other companies also really performing surgery in other companies. And Friedman makes this point, so that sometimes you don't know where UPS starts and where your computer company, like say Toshiba or Dell, starts. You don't know where your one company begins and when the other starts. They're integrated. That's insourcing. Okay, what does UPS bring to the table? Like I said, thousands of workers, thousands of fleets of trucks, their networking capabilities, tracking capabilities, managing capabilities, and they can give that not only to big corporations but also to individuals. And so what happens in a way it's great because you have small companies now have access to a world-class delivery system. But of course there's a darker side to it, but it's obvious that UPS or Amazon or whatever companies you're using to help you sell your things is actually getting a cut. So these great corporations are becoming even more mammoth. Okay. I do sell my books on Amazon, and guess what? They do get their cut. So, alrighty. So it's what's the most important? What does Amazon give me and my editor as book? Well, I'm the writer, but my editor is the one who is interested in distributing it. Well, I'm interested in it too, right? But I'm interested in writing well. I guess that's my main point. It's nice to see your books everywhere, though. What does Amazon give me as an artist, writer? It gives me a great distribution network. Otherwise, we'd have 3,000 books sitting in the storage, paying for storage, collecting dust, and then how do we deliver them? I mean, through the mail service, but the mail is not instant, and then there's somebody has to take the order. Somebody has to keep track of taxes and whatnot. So what Amazon does is they say, okay, we'll actually make the book. It's your book. We'll make the book because they have the printers. We'll store the book, and they won't have to store that much because it's instant on, how do you call it? On point making. I forget the right term, but essentially the person orders the book gets printed, on demand printing. The book gets printed, and then the great service that they provide, and that's why they're such a mammoth service, mammoth enterprise, UPS, Amazon, Walmart, and so on. They have great distribution networks. They can get the thing anywhere, but guess what? They do charge for it, and not a little bit. So they do get a big cut. So that happens at every level. Okay. Friedman points out that UPS, in fact, I bet you haven't thought about it this way, employs great mathematicians in order to tweak their supply chains and their algorithms in order to make them work best, in order to coordinate these great amounts of goods that are moving through their structures. Many of them with PhDs. So there you go. That's a new economy. Number 9, informing. Okay, informing. Informing refers to pretty much the information age that we live in. Google, which you can search for people. You can look somebody up. You can look for maps. You can inform yourself in terms of GPS. You can inform yourselves in terms of songs, movies, groups, and talk to other people. You have people talking to people, right? But you also have machines talking to machines. So it's a great sort of. In fact, they let me read you a quote really quickly from page 186 of The World is Flat by Friedman. Okay, so we're gonna read that 186 really quickly here. It's a kind of scary quote. In the age of the superpower search, everyone is a celebrity. Google levels information. It has no boundaries or education boundaries. Quote, "If I can operate Google, I can find anything," said Alan Cohen, vice president of airspace, which sells wireless technology. Google is like God. God is wireless. God is everywhere. And God sees everything. Any questions in the world, just ask God. God being Google, of course. Okay. So that's something, right? So that's informing. It forms you. It builds you. And you know, all of that is supercharged with cell phones, because we all have cell phones. And so, you know, nowadays you go to a foreign country and you need translation, just get your little cell phone and get it to translate for you. You get lost, your cell phone can help you. You need to look somebody up, and you need to post a picture, you want to listen to a song, you want to watch a movie in the airplane, whatever. So that's informing, okay? And that's a great but also a scary thing, this idea that Google is compared to God, right? Omniscient, omnipresent, and all-knowing. All right. The 10th item that is brought up by Friedman here is by Thomas Friedman, is what he calls the steroids. Now we got to remember that this was written in 2005 originally, so we got to give him a lot of credit. He's won the Pulitzer a few times, in that he really knew where things were going. Okay. Number one, out of the steroids that he mentions, because he calls them like superchargers, number one would be chips, like computing, computational capability. That's what really kind of supercharges this whole connectivity thing. Computational capability, like storage, input, output, like how much can you upload, how much can you download, like how much memory does your computer have, how much memory does your cell phone have. Okay. I bet more than last year. I bet more than 5 years ago. See what I'm saying? So like it's like an arms race for computing and computational capabilities. Now on top of that, you have AI, which requires so much energy, insane amounts of energy, and insane amount of memory. Okay, so he wasn't even writing about that back then, but he knew that computational capabilities were supercharging everything, and that they were mushrooming from the early years of the computational breakthrough into the world, which he says would be 1995 with the release of Netscape. Okay, so then the second important thing that really supercharges everything, the second steroid, as he puts it, would be messaging, file sharing. Okay, particularly over the phone. Okay, the phone is not a phone. That's silly. The phone is a computer, and much more than a computer even. So file sharing, right? You send your friend a picture, videos, voice, and the capability to just be connected instantly and not limited to text. You should have seen the way we sent messages back in the day, at the beginning of when cell phones just became universal in the developed world. Okay, texting was a sort of nightmare, right? You had to like click the same button like 5 times to get A, then B, click it another 5 times, then C another 5 times, right? And now of course you can talk, and the thing even completes your sentences. That is actually that's an algorithm, right? So that you don't even have to remember how to spell something, right? And it generates an emoji, which by the way was not in existence back then. It's a form of communication. Okay, and so messaging is something that he considers to be one of the great contributors in terms of what he calls the steroids. Number 3, phone calls over the internet. Okay, Skype, Zoom, particularly Skype and Google phones, okay, they become free. They use the wiring, and they use the infrastructure provided by all the networks in order to make phone calls over the internet. And so that is becoming the norm, and was becoming the norm, and was in a way replacing a lot of the old school telephones, okay, which essentially don't exist anymore. Okay. Then number 4, video conferencing. Now, he wrote this prior to the pandemic. He wrote it in 2005. So the pandemic hits, over a decade and a half later. And so then you have, imagine being the person or the company, the corporation that created Zoom prior to the pandemic, and investing in that corporation. They mushroomed in a way that it's just unthinkable. Now Zoom is everywhere, even beyond Skype, obviously beyond Skype for some reason. So Zoom really kind of took hold of the market, and I've taught countless classes on Zoom. You've taken classes on Zoom. We all know what that is, and that is video conferencing. That was dominated in the past by satellite communications, which were extremely expensive. Only, like, I remember, for example, watching a soccer World Cup final, and it was only like Fox or big channels that could have a live transmission from the actual stadium to the world. Now anybody with a cell phone can go and have a call, FaceTime or whatever, right? And have video conferencing. So he knew where he was going, and we should give credit to Friedman here. Number 5, computer graphics, video games, in particular visual and sounds. Okay, I mean, we can get into it a lot, but computer graphics are super important in the sense not only for gaming itself, but I mean, gaming itself is important too, and gaming actually does come up in the novel Reggaeton Cruise, which we're going to talk about, or which we might talk about depending on what class. But video games are important because they generate higher visual and sound standards that can be used and are later used by movies. In fact, some movies come after the video games later. So they set the standards, okay? Not only for visuals and sounds, but also for community building in the cloud. Number 6, wireless technologies, the smartphone. Everybody has a phone, which is a computer and more. Okay, so I want to read you a quote to close from that, from page 198, which kind of we'll end our talk. So we believe that the mobile phone will become the essential controller of a person's life, added Mitsuishi, oblivious to the double meaning of the English word control. Okay, so Mitsuishi was a person who worked for a communications company in Japan, quoted here in the book. I'm going to read it again. Quote, "We believe that the mobile phone will become the essential controller of a person's life," end quote, added Mitsuishi, oblivious to the double meaning of the English word control. Obviously control, he meant it, I think, as a remote control, but we're also controlled by the cell phone. And Thomas Friedman doesn't, I think, talk about too much, particularly in this segment of the book, about the possible pitfalls of these great communications and this building across cultures and across time and space, right? That the great platform for collaboration has built. But obviously it is used and misused by companies left and right, governments left and right, individuals left and right. And in fact, he does give one little example, for example, of a man who who gets who is a victim of Wikipedia, a smear campaign on Wikipedia, where somebody writes like an entry that he was to blame for the assassination of JFK, and that information spreads like wildfire, and then he finds it on multiple, like biography.com or something like that, and he has to like employ a lot of resources to fix his image. Well, I mean, that happens on every level, right? In terms of pictures being released of others, or AI made deep fakes and whatnot. So the smartphone is everywhere, and it is a central component, perhaps the central component at the technological level in people's lives. So Tamara Mitsuishi did mention that it would become essential on multiple levels and allow you to control, but also in a way be the subject of that control. But anyway, this ends our lecture as to the 10 world flatteners, intensifiers of globalization, as laid out by Thomas Friedman in his 2005 book, The World is Flat. And with this, we end our talk of globalization for the moment, particularly at the journalistic level. We might revisit it at a more abstract level by looking at Thomas Hyland Erickson's book, Globalization. Thank you and have a nice day.